It is the afternoon of September 12th. The last time it rained was exactly 3 long summer months ago. This area is in a severe drought. It is now 85 degrees. Relative humidity is only 23%. Under all these conditions, extreme fire behavior could occur. At 2:42 p.m., you are dispatched to join initial attack forces on a new fire start. The incident is approximately 2 acres, spreading uphill. The fire is burning in an 8-year-old loblolly pine plantation with a thick understory that includes patches of Virginia pine. It is threatening homes.
Chris, tell us about the events of September 12th and your role as dispatcher.
Well, we were still in late summer and Virginia was experiencing a drought, and I guess maybe our worst fears were realized when we did have a fire, and the fire was in a pine stand. Several times throughout the day, I'd have updates with Drew Arn, who was kind of in the role of the incident commander, and he would ask for fire weather. And I guess most memorable to me was the first time I gave him fire weather, in that it was about 85 degrees and the humidity was 23%. And no one wants to be an armchair quarterback, but sitting there in that office, I realized that a pine plantation with that low humidity and that high temperature just had, red flags all over it. And I relayed that to the folks, that the weather forecast for that evening was calling for humidities by the next morning to be as high as 91%, no winds, and that perhaps the best course of action would have been to pull out of the pine plantation, use an indirect attack method, and get it later that evening. And as our worst fears were realized, the fire did blow up due to the low humidities and the topography that we realized later, and caused the overrun and a lot of crowning.
We knew the weather conditions were bad. I didn't specifically shoot weather. I typically do on a scene, but I didn't shoot the weather, but I knew that it was extremely dry, extremely high temperatures, and really low relative humidity for the day. So it wasn't something that we felt the need to take the weather. We already knew it was at the crucial point.
This is the second state forestry employee to arrive on the Woodview fire. He brings the Dozer fire plow transport unit. Even though everyone knows the risks and hazards of the dry fuel conditions and fuel loadings, they quickly engage with this fire that is threatening homes without posting lookouts and verifying viable escape routes and safety zones. The first state forester on scene becomes the Dozer operator. He had basically been serving as the initial IC, but once he jumps into that Dozer's cab, he really no longer is in command of the entire fire. And even though he says he knows that it's a bad situation and the fire could possibly crown, he has an urgency to try to punch Dozer line around the entire fire while it is still small, before it burns up the hill into homes.
About the time when I arrived, the size up of the fire looked to be about 1 to 2 acres, maybe 3. In some 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old cutover was my guess at the time. The fire wasn't doing very much, just slowly creeping along. Occasionally I'd see a loblolly or a cedar torch out, but fire behavior wasn't unreasonable or anything. Basically, I unloaded the Dozer, served as a tractor operator. My plan of action was to go in at the rear of the fire and start working the right flank of the fire, just staying as close to the fire as I could, plowing a line at the time, and Dirk was to follow along behind me with a drip torch and fire out the line as we went, trying to carry black as we went along.
So touch base with our Dozer operator on the radio to see where he was at that point, and he had just made it around the bend and was proceeding to go into the pine plantation area. Before going into that area, I was with the wildlife manager, who was right at my side, and spoke to several of the local volunteer fire departments about location of what was to the west of us, what the basic fire behavior was going on at that point, what was to our west, what was to the east and north, and of course we were sort of south. And they proceeded to give a general size up of the fire and fire behavior from what they had encountered being first on scene, and then gave me general brief descriptions of topography and all to the west, north, and east. So at that point, touched base with the Dozer again, and he was already proceeded to be actively pursuing to punch in line. And we were following the black for the most part at the beginning, but because of the time lag between me making communications to gather that information and the Dozer still being operable was now started to get away from me, so I wasn't directly doing a back burn on the back side of the Dozer as tight as I should have been. So we proceeded up the line, myself and the wildlife manager, and we were going up the line burning as quick as we can to catch up to the Dozer.
After a few hundred yards, the Dozer operator realizes that these two people burning out behind him are not keeping up with the Dozer's pace. To protect them from the heat of the fire bumping their line, he steers the Dozer farther away from the fire's edge. But this tactic also puts a wider swath of unburned fuel between them and the fire. The state forestry employee who is burning out does have his PPE, including a shroud and fire shelter. However, the state game biologist burning out with him has no PPE. In fact, he is wearing only cotton pants, work boots, and his agency's short-sleeved polo shirt. Seconds before the blow-up, the lead burner removes one glove to adjust the breather valve on his drip torch. When the blow-up hits, he drops the glove. He will suffer the painful consequences. A serious, potentially fatal burnover is about to occur. A key contributing factor is confusion over a critical radio transmission.
At that point, I got on the radio and said that the line had been compromised or that the fire had jumped. That radio transaction was probably not communicated clearly. All in all, hindsight being 20/20, after speaking with people involved with the fire, that communication right there was the pinnacle point where things went extremely wrong with our procedure in attacking the fire. Having thought that communication went across clearly, I assumed that the Dozer operator was clear that the fire had now been essentially on 3 of the 4 sides of us. So the Dozer operator, having said that message was not clear, at hindsight being 20/20 after the fire incident, the gentleman and I proceeded to keep burning and go forward. So we proceeded to move forward, trying to catch up to the Dozer. At that point, the actual head of the fire overtook us and crowned out.
So, to summarize this important sequence of events, when the fire jumps their line between the Dozer and the 2 burners, the lead burner, with the radio, reports this critical information to the Dozer operator. He tells him that their line has been compromised. Unfortunately, the Dozer operator is not exactly sure what this means. After hearing this transmission, he nonetheless tells the 2 people to catch up to the Dozer, burning out as they come. Once their slop-over spot fire area cools down, they follow his instructions and proceed toward the Dozer, continuing to burn out. Just as they reach the rear of the Dozer, the fire completely blows up.
So at that point, the smoke and the fire had been, and the preheated air was thick. The gentleman and I didn't know how far the Dozer was from us, and at that point we saw the rear end of the Dozer start to back up through the smoke, and actually at that point Les said, clear, the gentleman, the Dozer operator said, clear the area, I'm coming back away. And at that point we didn't realize he was so close, and he swung around, and we actually fell backwards or jumped backwards or just moved out of the way of the oncoming backing up Dozer.
When I turned around, we started back down the fire line, and I was thinking Dirk was in front of me. And so I'm telling him to run. Well, then he radios back and asks me if he wants me to follow the Dozer. And I just replied, well, you're in front of me. Well, I didn't realize that he was so close behind the Dozer when I spun it that the plow caught a sapling and knocked him down into the bushes behind me. And so I didn't even realize he was there. And, luckily we didn't run over him, and that, that was just didn't know he was even there. So at first, as we were traveling back down the fire line, I didn't realize that he was behind me. He was, I was still thinking the whole time that he's in front of me, and I'm trying to catch up with him. Well, then, and we lost communication. He had dropped his mic and was trying to run and gather his mic back so he could, reply back to me. So we'd actually got probably 300 feet or so back down the fire line before he was finally able to regain communications, and then he was, able to communicate and say, "I'm actually behind you, stop." And so as soon as he did that, I was able to stop the Dozer and let him catch up, and that's when he was able to get into the Dozer with me.
This lead burner, who finally escapes the fire by jumping up into the Dozer's cab, already has burns on his face and hand. Now completely surrounded by the blinding smoke and searing flames and fire, these two men in the Dozer's cab do not know the third firefighter's location. They do know that he will not survive inside this blow-up fire environment, especially without any PPE. This man will later say that he literally thought he was going to die.
As soon as that happened, he jumps in the Dozer. I asked where T. Moss was. He said, right behind me. And so I looked back, and we sat there maybe 5 to 10 seconds, didn't see T anywhere. And of course, the whole time, the fires all around us, our entire line had been lost. So at that point, when we didn't see T, we waited. The Dozer had already been overheated for a while. As soon as I turned around, the Dozer immediately overheated. I knew that basically that we couldn't sit there and wait any longer for T, so we continued on down the line. We didn't know if T had gotten out another way or was just down in the line, but we knew, it was too hot. There's no way we could go back outside the Dozer and do anything for him. So we continued on down the line, approximately another 150 feet. I got to an area that was a little bit cooler. The fire had, there was just an area that the fire hadn't crowned through, so we stopped the Dozer again. Just stopped, looked back, and T caught up to us. He came running down the line, caught up to us, and of course he starts, beating on the door of the Dozer to get in. We opened the door and got him in.
When this second burner finally gets to the Dozer, its door is too hot to touch. They have to open it from the inside. And even though all three men are now crammed inside the Dozer's small cab, built for just one person, they still aren't safe. Even more unfolding problems continue to challenge their survival and escape.
The Dozer wouldn't move forward because we now have 3 people inside of the Dozer, and thinking that the Dozer had either had some sort of line get fried or some mechanical damage, it just ended up that one of us was standing on the actual brake pedal which made the Dozer not move forward. Once the Dozer operator realized that and had looked down and acknowledged that, said, lift your foot up, at that point the Dozer bucked forward, and we continued on back down the line.
I radioed to Drew, to call rescue and to also get at least another Dozer en route and to check on a helicopter. We knew that, at this point it was going to be much harder to control than what we originally thought, and so we're going to back up and regroup. But first, just immediately I could see that that Dirk first was burned, and then as T got in, I could see that he had been burned, and knew that we were going to need rescue and to go ahead and get them en route.
If you are a wildland firefighter, this entire Woodview fire burnover experience should be an important wake-up call. Every time that you arrive on an emerging Type 3, 4, or 5 fire, even one that is threatening homes, you must first take the time to look up, down, and around, and base your tactics and actions on all significant situational awareness indicators that you observe and learn from others. Remember, homes can be rebuilt, lives cannot. You must also ensure that you have fully considered your LCES checklist. LCES must be applied and made known to everyone on scene. Unburned fuel between you and the fire must provide you with an adequate and reliable margin of safety. If this margin of safety is questionable, discuss using another suppression tactic. Your escape route must always take into account how difficult it is to travel quickly. Therefore, you must consider your escape route's distance to safety, balanced with the potential rate of fire spread and intensity. All of these initial fire size-up actions and organizational and command responsibilities and more are explained and conveniently outlined for you in your yellow IRPG, Incident Response Pocket Guide. Use it. After the Woodview fire burnover, the lead burner said that he had safety concerns with the initial plan for fire line location and tactics. But because the Dozer operator who ordered this suppression operation had more years of fire experience, the lead burner decided to defer. He never vocalized his concerns. Afterwards, even the Dozer operator said that he knew it was a bad situation and the fire could possibly crown. Perhaps if someone had questioned his proposed suppression plan, a discussion could have led to reconsidering the suppression plan tactics that led to the burnover. When it comes to safety in the wildland fire environment, it is vital that everyone always speaks up and voices their observations and concerns. Let's face it, a rookie's eyes might see something that the veteran, due to a variety of perfectly logical reasons, simply does not see. Therefore, never forget, when it comes to you and your crew's safety, always speak up. And of course, all firefighters on all fires should always have full PPE. On the Woodview fire, had the burner been wearing PPE, it would have saved him a painful stay in the hospital. Thank you for watching this. Please remember these key actions and decisions that led up to the Woodview fire burnover. Learn from this incident. After watching this, you can now move forward with even more important firefighter lessons learned under your belt.